Cuba's power grids are still failing, and we're talking about outages that last 12, 18, sometimes 24 hours. This is my second story on Cuba. I will continue to monitor what's happening in Cuba because Cuba and America's foreign policy shift in Cuba have a lot of signs about a failing American foreign policy, as well as how you treat your neighbors. If you tell me how you treat your neighbors, I could tell you a lot about who you are. And so we're learning a lot about who America is under the Trump administration by how they're treating the nation of Cuba. I'm Richard Fowler. This is the front line, where there's no chaos, there's just context. So let me start here. In the first video, I talked to you about the Cuban blackout. So we've had some developments on that over the past couple of days. So now Cuba, so there has been I'll give you a recap. There's been a 3-month-long energy blockade against Cuba put on them by the United States, in which the United States just threatened everybody who wants to give Cuba energy, saying if you give Cuba energy, basically in a nutshell, what we're going to do is we're going to sanction you, we're going to put a tariff on you, we're going to stop you from doing it. And so as a result of that, nobody wants to give Cuba any energy. And, that's been bad for Cuba because Cuba, like many other countries in the Caribbean, are dependent upon oil imports for their survival. But Cuba got some oil. This time, the oil came from one of Cuba's old friends. I wrote a story about this in Forbes. I also put that link in the bio. This old friend was the nation of Russia. A Kremlin spokesperson said that Cuba is an old friend, and we would not let our old friend, this is a spokesperson, Dmitry Petrov, from the Kremlin, said, Cuba's our old friend, and we would not let our old friend go hungry or without power. So they sent a U.S., EU, British sanctioned oil tanker through the Black Sea, past the EU, through international waters, through U.S. controlled waters, right into Cuba's ports on the last day of May. And Donald Trump, the president of these great United States, the president that issued the energy blockade, allowed that Russian ship to pass through and dock in Cuba and expel 730,000 barrels of oil from Russia to the people of Cuba, giving it about 7 to 10 days of electricity, of power. Now, at first you could say, Richard, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal, Richard. That's not a big deal. Don't you worry about it. But it is a big deal. I don't want you to walk away from this. This is a very big deal. Because at the beginning of this crisis, the Mexicans, the Prime Minister of Mexico, capitalist country, free trade country, a friend to the United States, one of our number one trading partners, said, hey, can we help Cuba? The United States said, no, we'll put a tariff on you. At the same time, the United States went around the Caribbean, to Jamaica, to Guyana, and said, you must end. These are America's neighbors in America's backyard. We would say on America's block. If you want to continue having good relations with the United States, you must end your medical diplomacy program with Cuba. In other words, Cuba is sending doctors to your country, helping you prop up your healthcare system. If you want to stay friends with us here in the United States, you must end your medical diplomacy program with Cuba, even though it could cause your health system to collapse. Mind you, we here in the United States, we're not going to send you any doctors. We're not going to send you any nurses. Actually, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to take your doctors and we're going to take your nurses when they graduate and have them come work in America. So that's what America's doing. But Russia, if you want to send oil to Cuba on a humanitarian basis, will allow you to do it. Why not? And when the White House was asked about this by the AP and by others, if another Russian ship would be allowed to travel international waters to give Cuba more oil, they didn't have an answer. They didn't have an answer because the answer is, yeah, of course, they will allow another Russian ship to give Cuba oil. So then the question becomes, what are the limits? If you have an energy blockade? Now, I don't agree with the energy blockade on Cuba, but if there is an energy blockade on Cuba, and that's American foreign policy to create economic change in the country and to create regime change, which is the new Trump buzzword, then you would hold to that, right? You think you would stick to that policy, and that would be America's foreign policy. Our foreign policy directive when it comes to Cuba is we will not allow any oil, any energy to come in to Cuba. We're the big man. And also remember, in the 2026 national security strategy that the United States issued, they said they want utter and total dominance in the Western Hemisphere, this hemisphere. But you allowed Russia to get an oil tanker through that is sanctioned by the United States. That's not adding up. So you said this ship is sanctioned by us. It cannot come in our waters. It cannot move. It is sanctioned, but it could go to Cuba and drop off oil. Interesting. It shows that there are limits to American foreign policy. It shows that other foreign actors who are supposed to be America's foe can bamboozle this president when they want to without consequence, right? I mean, without anything at this point. I mean, I'm at a loss for words because the whole point of this energy blockade against Cuba was to create regime change. But if the Russians can drop oil off in Cuba, then I guess regime change only happens when the Russians say it does. So who has more control of the Western Hemisphere? The United States or Russia? And I'm sure there are other countries in the hemisphere that are asking, right? Because as this is happening, China, right, has signed a trade agreement with countries in South America for soybeans. China has just created a trade agreement with Canada for batteries and cell phone technology. So how are you exactly having dominance in the Western Hemisphere when everybody's cut side deals and a sanctioned Russian tanker is entering your hemisphere? Moral of the story, it sounds like America's talking a good game, but we're not about a good game. Pay attention, y'all. Pay attention. And that's why I'm following this Cuba story, because I think the Cuba story is exposing that even if you are a weak country or a weaker country, and Cuba's a small country, it only has 11 million citizens. It's a smaller country. It's a poorer country because America hasn't fully opened up trade relationships with it, right? And if you're willing to stand up to the United States, come what may, it seems as though America, and if you have somebody in your corner, that's willing to be like, yeah, we're not afraid, Putin, in this case, Trump will acquiesce. We'll have to see what happens here. But once again, we're at the Fowler Show. We'll watch this. We hope you will watch it too. But you don't have to because we will. Make sure to like and subscribe on this video. And once again, I'll see you next time.